police in the morning.
Welcome, B-Movie fans, to another B-Movie interview. I'm Paul, and joining me today is Paul Osier, the game director for a new survival horror game called Lazaretto. Paul, welcome to our show.
Thanks.
So how long have you been a game developer?
I guess about 15 years now. Started back with online Flash and Shockwave games, doing like online games for places like sites like Hot Wheels, Speed Racer, Transformers, things like that. Then eventually I got into Unity, did a couple of online games there, and then moved on from there.
Very cool. What inspired you to become a game developer?
Well, I've been playing games since Atari, and then Nintendo. Exactly, and then Nintendo and things like that. And then I remember I used to play these little point and click adventure games on the old Macs, and I remember thinking they were fun, but I was thinking I could definitely make something like that. But I always had in the back of my head I always wanted to make a game. So eventually I went on to become a graphic designer and had a web design company. And then, I tried to figure out how to make games through there. So I had a couple of clients that were, in the entertainment business. One was Speed Racer. And, eventually I partnered up with a local guy who was making games. And we made a game for Speed Racer, which was actually really popular back in the day. And kind of took off from there. Very
cool. Yeah, follow your passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, doing websites back in the day, if you're doing a cool website, like, I did a website for Speed Racer, and that was great, but doing websites for, like, law firms and things like that, it's tough when, you just can't get into it.
I can imagine.
Yeah, the dry stuff, it just doesn't, it pays the bills, but I find it difficult, making games is a lot easier for me, honestly.
Definitely. Are survival horror games your favorite type of game, or is it just the kind of game that you're currently working on?
I'd say for the past year or two, yeah, survival horror is definitely my favorite, just because of Lazaretto, and I've been kind of immersing myself, in games like that. But I've played all kinds of games. I'm probably bread and butter. I'd probably go back to shooters. I've probably put over a couple thousand hours in Battlefield franchise.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely understand. Just putting a ton of hours in a video game. I think I put over 100 hours into Final Fantasy X years ago. So just once you start, it's you just can't stop. It's I have to get everything on this.
Oh yeah. And with like I was saying, with I'll pick up something occasionally. It was a while ago, but the Wolfenstein New Order kind of stands out. That was really fun, and that only took a few days. But Battlefield, back with Battlefield 1943 on Xbox, spent so many hours on that, and then on to Battlefield 3 and 4, and honestly, the new one, I have it, but I with my game and everything, I haven't been playing a lot of games lately because I feel guilty. I should be working.
The burden of being an adult.
Exactly.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Lazaretto, the just general style, the idea in the game?
Sure. So it's a first-person survival horror game. Lazaretto, the name is actually an historical name for a maritime quarantine island. So back in the day, if you entered the country by boat, they'd test you to see if you had any diseases or anything. And if you were sick, they would place you on one of these islands. And they were, they were all over the world, honestly, back in the day. There was, several on the East Coast of the U.S. There was one in Philly for a long time. So yeah, it was a place, any type of when a breakout would come out, they would also stick you on there, even if maybe you just lived near there. A lot of times it was a a hospital to quarantine different diseases, but also, a place where they would just kind of catch all, like if they didn't know what was wrong with you, they'd stick you on there. So anyway, that's kind of the idea which you're exploring. It's, the idea is that you're just a regular guy and you're looking to do a little bit of urban exploring, checking out the island and the different buildings. So you go on it at night, you find clues, figure out how to enter buildings, solve puzzles, find different environments, and then you start to slowly interact with, I'd say, just beings that are still there, and a big mystery starts to unravel. And at one point, and this is where we really try to differentiate ourselves, as you get deeper, you start to kind of leave reality and enter a different plane of existence. So, and that's where, like, we explore a lot of these crazy theories I have on, like what ghosts are, and sanity and subconscious, and, dreams and time, things like that. So, like I said, the game starts out pretty down to earth. You're standing on a small beach at night, looking up at a building. Everything's like normal. And then, slowly things start to unwind. Eventually you find this, you go into the hospital and the different areas. You eventually find this old house, which turns out to be the nurses' quarters from back in the day. And then, you find what looks like the remains of an old seance. And through all these series of steps, you get actually pulled into the seance. And then that's where I kind of start to explore these alternate experiences. So it kind of gets out there for a while. And, I don't go out of my way to spoon feed the player. I'm very happy with the player coming up to their own interpretations of, the experiences they're seeing. So, I mean, that's kind of the idea. And it's a 3-chapter game. And the first chapter, kind of deals with the stuff I was talking about. And the other 2 chapters, you really get into some much deeper stuff. It's actually a pretty big story I came up with.
Sounds like a lot of research went into it too. It sounds really awesome.
Yeah, I tried to keep, as real as possible, other than the fact that there are, these things walking around that you encounter. But, I tried to keep it realistic. Like I said, I love shooter games as much as the next person, and even, game like horror games where you have weapons. But I was really trying to come from the aspect of that, you just showed up with a flashlight, just to check things out. And then all of a sudden you find yourself not being able to get out, and then just getting deeper and deeper. And like, what have I gotten into? And, you don't just happen to find a minigun and all this ammo. You're just, you're just yourself with your flashlight. And also I tried to keep it realistic. Like, a lot of games, with puzzles, and you do need puzzles, but I tried to make them make sense for the environment. In other words, like the backstory is these buildings, this whole island basically shut down in 1922. So there's really no way you'd find an old fuse and fire up a generator or anything like that. That's just not going to happen. So I really tried to make it as realistic as possible as far as like the physical stuff goes. As far, like I said, you need puzzles to move things along, keep it interesting. But again, try to make them. I try to make them as realistic and historically correct as possible.
Makes sense. Yeah, I love in video games where they'll have an ancient puzzle that is just so ridiculous. It's like there's no way they could have made that back then.
Yeah, exactly. Now, like, I can get away with stuff in this alternate universe that I'm talking about. So, that was one way to kind of expand on the different things, and not make it so mundane and just that you're just in these old buildings. But yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. And there's some great games out there, but you're like, well, all right, what is this puzzle, elaborate puzzle doing in the middle of this, old factory?
It's like, who had time to build this, and like, did you even notice while somebody was constructing this?
Exactly. Now, I will say in part 3, which hasn't started obviously, but it's all kind of written out. I have some puzzles involving like automatons, which really fascinate me. Like the old, um, they go back even to the 16, 1700s. These like elaborate, robotic puzzle, or whatever they are, like just a some type of a wind up
Oh yeah, I
mechanism
know what
that
you're talking
does
about.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll like
yeah.
move
I mean,
around and things like that.
yeah. So again, and that that stuff was real, and people collected them, and people would have wealthy people would have them made just because they were interesting pieces. So I thought that was a cool way to introduce it, and kind of an elaborate puzzle. But again, that's not till part three.
Yeah, those things are pretty creepy, like when you actually see them too. So at least I
Oh, they
always
are.
thought so.
There's actually, I haven't been to it, but there's a museum outside of New York that I've been dying to go see, and yeah, some of them are like totally creepy.
That's something you want in your bedroom, like just staring at you at night. It's like,
Yep, absolutely.
so we here at B Movie Bros, both Corey and I, we're huge survival horror fans. What survival horror games would you say inspired this, if any?
Um, well, I mean, obviously try and come up with all your original ideas, but I mean, Amnesia was definitely an inspiration. Alan Wake, that was a cool one. I mean, certain things about that. Um, let me see. I mean, there are certain parts of Evil Within. I
That
mean,
was a great game, yeah.
yeah. I mean, Laura, that Spider Woman. I mean, that completely freaked me out. And I really don't get you know scared playing games, but that one had me like popping off the headphones, looking around, like, did I hear something?
It's like
uh,
right behind me.
exactly. I mean, layers of fear. That did a really great job with the environment, and just the creepiness factor. I'm really looking forward to playing when they come out. Agony and there's another one, Ghost Theory. I don't know if you've seen anything on that. It looks pretty wild.
I've heard of that. I haven't seen too much of it, but yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yeah. So, what qualities of a survival horror game do you think make it the most memorable and the most terrifying?
Um, Good question. So I mean, it's kind of there's a bit of not a complete plan, but with horror, I mean there is kind of a formula. I think, at least. I mean, obviously you can break it, but generally, I mean, it starts with the environment, and whether it's an actual scary environment or not, I think it's important that you feel isolated and helpless. That's a big part of it. And again, going back to what I was saying about shooters, the reason we decided not to have any weapons is because and they're fun, but they tend not to be that scary. So we definitely wanted to take advantage of the isolation and helplessness. Great sound design definitely helps. You have to build tension, and to me, I think if you have restraint and hold off on jump scares and things like that, that's what really makes a scary game. I mean, Alien Isolation did that. I don't know if you ever played Slenderman, the Arrival.
Yeah, I remember that
I
one.
don't think I finished it, but I remember the beginning of that game. You just walk down this long road, and you go into this house, and just the anticipation of something happening was like really freaking me. And nothing happened at all. Like there's nothing in that house whatsoever. But I remember just like looking around every corner. I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to die here. So, I think that's important. Like again, the restraint. When you start to play a game and immediately something jumps out, you're like, all right, what is this? And then they no longer become scary. I also think if you have something that's kind of out of whack, that definitely like offsets your brain a little bit. I mean, going back to movie reference, kind of like the rabbit and Donnie Darko.
It's
It
like
just didn't make
slightly off.
sense. So I think that's a great way to build tension and kind of tweak your interest. But then I think unique enemies, and then as far as making something terrifying, I think that there has to be danger there, and it's something I kind of learned in the making of Lazaretto. It started out kind of creepy, and then we realized, all right, we need it needs to have danger too, just not scary. I mean, like, for example, you watch a lot of older movies, and if there's just ghosts moving around, it's creepy, but it's not necessarily scary. So you need some type of a danger mechanism where something can hurt you or whatever. And again, if you're powerless with the enemies, as far as like no weapons or how you gonna shoot a ghost anyway, but your only defense is to either just face it or just freak out and panic.
Pretty much, yeah. It seems like with horror, like our own imaginations are our own worst enemies. Like, just like you said, when you're just there waiting for something, it's like the worse than when it actually comes out. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm a big movie fan, so I tend to go back to movies a lot. But I mean, Blair Witch. When I saw that, I kept away from the hype. I didn't watch any previews, and then I watched it at home, with the lights out. And I'm telling you, that movie was brilliant, especially if you like stayed away from all the hype and didn't know, there was all the parodies and stuff like that going around. I really shielded myself. But I mean, what a great movie! And you never really see anything ever.
yeah, and yet it's it's like really scary at times.
Oh yeah, and I remember at the very end thinking, man, this movie's been great. Just don't screw it up and have like some dumb monster jump out. And they didn't. What a great ending,
Definitely.
But again, it's your imagination that made it go. All the sounds in the woods and you couldn't tell if they were kids or screams or laughing.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I remember I was watching some documentary about World War II veterans, and one of them said something really interesting, that when he was in the trenches waiting for the enemy to come to approach him, he
Right.
would see like a rock, and he said, I wish I didn't have any kind of imagination, because all I could think of was that rock, there was a guy behind it, and it wasn't until they were finally safe that would go away. But he said that was worse than the actual combat, and like it really like speaks a lot about horror and like how our minds kind of craft it.
Absolutely, and on the same token, I've seen documentaries on, the soldiers that fought on D-Day. Even though they were risking a really high certainty of death, they said the worst part was just waiting, like on the boat for the attack. A lot of them would rather just get it over with and face it somehow. So yeah, I mean, your mind plays so much into it. So that's one of the things we try and take advantage of in the game is I mean, some things are black and white, but other things are pretty vague, and we want to let the player imagination kind of run wild.
Very cool. Yeah, game development in general seems like a really interesting style of art, because not only do you have to tell an engaging story, but you actually have to put the character into the environment. So what would you say is the most challenging part of game design?
Well, with this game in particular, well, we're a 2-person team, so that's the biggest challenge. I mean, we have a couple of freelancers we use time to time, but a small team makes it tough. But yeah, for Lazaretto, to me, the hardest part was figuring how to tell. Well, a couple things. Figuring how to tell the story in 3 chapters, because each chapter has to stand on its own. You can't just not explain anything at all and just stop. So we had to make 3 individual game stories. But then the also really overall the tricky part was just how much of the story do we give away? From the very beginning, I've always wanted to keep it vague and mysterious. It doesn't all have to make sense to me, but you have to find a balance. It can't be completely out there where people just don't get anything at all. But I think it's finding that balance so people enjoy the experience and come up to with their own interpretations, and talk about it. and again, it's that feeding of information. Like honestly, one of the things that drives me crazy in games is, I think it was, what was it? I'm trying to think of an example. I think BioShock was one of them. There's so much reading in the beginning that it's like it basically tells you everything, and now you're put in it. But again, I wanted to come from the point of view where, maybe you did, you as the player in the game, maybe you did a little, you know, look up on what this place was, and then you wanted to check it out. But you really don't know anything about the people who live there and work there, and the patients or anything. So it's really, an exploratory. And yeah, I mean, we give clues throughout, but it's definitely one of those things where we kind of go back and forth. I'm like, how much should I give on information about this? How much should I not? So that's been tough.
It's like a really kind of subtle sort of story. Sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty big story about what happened in 1922, but it's just by finding quick notes here and there, or encountering different beings, or whatever. It's not, again, I didn't want to, the player was out there investigating, so I didn't want to have like all this information about who was there and what happened. It's basically, it's unfolding to the player as they play.
Sounds really cool. So
yeah, hope so.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I saw the trailer. That was really awesome. So, and from everything I'm hearing, I'm looking forward to playing it.
Cool.
So, our next question. Corey and I like to debate about this. We ask everybody we interview this very important question, which is, what do you think of hairless cats?
They scare me. Although I'd say, was it Mr. Bigglesworth from Austin Powers?
Oh yeah.
I guess it softened me up a little bit, but they kind of freaked me out.
Yeah, Corey has a weird obsession with hairless cats. I think they look weird. I think they look like they always look angry for one, and they look like little moving abortions. So it just freaks me out. Like
they seem to be. It seems to me it would be cold and wrinkly. I'm sure it's not, but yeah, it would kind of freak me out. I've never seen one in person, but I don't know. Maybe I'll put one in the game.
There you go. Scare some people with that. Like
exactly.
Yeah. Whenever I think of them, it reminds me of in Jurassic Park when they're talking about maybe we've gone too far. Like maybe man shouldn't experiment with this kind of stuff. Like that's hairless cats to me. It's like we've gone too far, guys. Science needs to take a step back for me.
Absolutely. Why are they hairless anyway? I really don't know anything about them. Is it like a genetic thing, or are they bred that way?
If I remember correctly, they're bred that way to be non-allergenic to people who are allergic to cat hair. But in my opinion, just
that's
own
pretty
another,
freaky.
Yeah, just own another animal. Like
yeah, exactly. How about you just have a dog instead?
Buy a fish tank. It'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. Naturally hairless.
Exactly. So, when is Lazaretto set for release, or is there, or are you guys still working on that?
We're shooting. We're actually way over. We're very late, honestly. But we're at this point. We're kind of wrapping things up. We're shooting for late February, possibly early March. Sooner the better, though. I mean, like I said, what happens when you work on your own game, you tend to have, hey, it'd be cool. And then, next thing you know, you're 3 weeks longer because of one silly idea you had.
It's like, but you have to have that idea. And it's like, for the creator, it's like, if you don't have that, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. So I respect
absolutely.
that.
You get obsessed with it. And it's just like, well, yeah, the whole thing's crap without it. So, it's a constant battle.
And where can we follow you in order to find out more about Lazaretto and any other games you may be working on?
Well, there's LazarettoGame.com, which is, it has links to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, stuff like that. And then the company site is EnterTheMonkey.com, which has information on other upcoming games. But to be perfectly honest, we are just straight up obsessed with Lazaretto, and we're trying to make it a bit of a franchise, with the 3-chapter game. So we anticipate working on Lazaretto for the next several years, hopefully.
Good to hear. Definitely. Yeah. So there you have it, folks. Lazaretto, a survival game created by Paul Osier. If you haven't checked out the trailer yet, you can find it on lazarettogame.com. We suggest you do because it's really awesome. So, Paul, thank you for joining us, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Definitely. If you have an independent film you're working on and would like to discuss it, you can email us at bmoviebros@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at bmoviebros or my personal Twitter at bmoviepaul. Don't forget to listen to our podcast. We review a different B-movie each week. New episodes every Friday on our website, bmoviebros.com. If you have a movie you'd like us to review or any additional comments, feel free to leave a message below. This has been another B-Movie interview. We are the B-Movie Bros saying, be brave, be alive, and be back next time. If you have an independent film you're working on and would like to discuss it, you can email us at bmoviebros@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at bmoviebros or my personal Twitter at bmoviepaul. Don't forget to listen to our podcast. We review a different B-movie each week. New episodes every Friday on our website, bmoviebros.com. If you have a movie you'd like us to review or any additional comments, feel free to leave a message below. This has been another B-Movie interview. We are the B-Movie Bros saying, be brave, be alive, and be back next time.